Hello everybody, it's Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and on this episode I want to talk about a tool that everybody has in their sewing kit that's probably one of the most functional, most important tools to use, and we love to hate it because when we pull this tool out, we know we're in trouble. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about the little lowly seam ripper. Here's a little one right here. Everybody has seen a seam ripper. We know the basic components of a seam ripper, simply a handle with a long steel shaft that's pointed, two pointed ends, and a little sharp V cutout part in here. And this is the part that cuts out our stitches. Now, a lot of people don't like to call seam ripping. They like to call it undoing your sewing, that kind of thing. Whatever you want to call it, the fact is when we have to get one of these out, it's because we've made a mistake and we need to get rid of our stitches. But there are a ton of different styles of seam rippers on the market, and I have a few of them that I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to talk about them in the order, well, close to the order of my preference. So this first one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the camera down a little bit. Just shove these aside. I've made a couple of sample strips with stitches in it to try these out on, and here's the first one. This is the seam ripper that came with my sewing machine. Most sewing machines, when you buy them brand new, they'll come with a little bit of a basic toolkit, and in that toolkit will be this seam ripper. I think this one had a cap, a protective cap that went over this end of it, but I don't have that right now. It's gone by the way. Anyways, that's what you get. Okay, in a pinch, these will work, but they're not, I don't like them. I don't like them for a lot of reasons. One, we don't have the little protective red ball on the end of this. Now, some of the ones that do come with your sewing machines will have that, but that little red ball is really important to protect your hands and to protect your fabric when you're seam ripping. The other thing I don't like about this is it's very short. I like something with a little bit more length to it. It gives me a little bit more leverage. So basically, using a seam ripper, what you need to do is at the beginning of your stitch line, you'll usually have, I don't on this one, you'll usually have a stop and start, like a back stitch. So you'll need to use the pointy end, this end up here, and just get that underneath your stitches and then cut. Now here's something else that I don't like about these little seam rippers. They don't stay sharp very long, that little piece inside. And as far as I know, once that becomes dull, you've got to buy a new seam ripper, or you're going to be pulling your stitches out, not ripping them, as I'm doing right here. And this one's a little dull because I can hear it. Now sometimes as you go along using your seam ripper, you're able to just pull a few of the stitches out without even cutting them at this point. And that's what I'm doing here. Now, once you've got a few of the stitches out, you can open up your seam. Do not try to cut your stitches out from this side, because, or from this, what I mean is, don't try going in here. Now, there are people who do this, and I've seen it, and we might give it a try here in a second, but it's not recommended. You should be pulling your stitches out from your seam like this, and you just do the same thing. Or if you want to get daring, you can stick your seam ripper in here in that seam and then pull. Now sometimes it's easier if you pin it down to something so you have the leverage, and then you can just put this under and go. But the problem is this, with this particular seam ripper, we don't have a protective red ball here, so I could, with either one of these blades, cut through my fabric. So this one, very cheap, kind of thing that comes with your sewing machine. You don't want to use it, really. You want to go out and invest in something else, like this. Now there are many different styles of seam rippers, as I've said. This one particular one has a protective cap at one end, this rubber thing, which I'll explain that to you on the end as well. And inside is your standard seam ripper. Now you can see this one has a little longer handle, about the same length of shaft here, but one difference. We've got a little protective red ball on the end of that shorter prong, and that's what I was saying before. That helps protect your hand and your fabric when you're cutting through it. So I would start ripping this seam the same way as I did with the sewing machine seam ripper. Pull a few stitches out at the beginning so I can get in here, and then open this up, and I'm going to stick this with the red ball on the inside of my seams, and then I can zip through and not worry too much about ripping my fabric. Now I'm going to show you. To do this, I need to be able to anchor it down. So I'm just going to grab my wool mat here, just moving my coffee cup out of the way because I don't want to have a spill. So this is a wool mat, my pressing mat. I'm going to grab a straight pin, and you just lay your fabric down and pin it. Now you could do this in a piece of styrofoam, some other kind of a pad, whatever. You just want to anchor it, so you can do this. It leaves one hand free for tugging on the fabric. And now I'm going to take my seam ripper with the red ball end, and I'm going to put the red ball in between the seam. And now I can just move along and pull out my stitches. Now the thing is, you still have to be careful because you could rip your fabric even with the protective ball on here. You can use it to cut out your seams this way as well. But again, you want to do this relatively slowly. You don't want to be a speed demon, because if you start to get too fast, that's when you could run into a problem cutting your fabric. So this is my usual go-to seam ripper, but there are some things I don't like about this particular one. I told you it came with a cap. That's great for protecting it. But when I take the cap off and try to put it on the end, it will not fit on the end. So what I've got is this thing rolling around on my desk, and it will roll. Right now on the wool mat, it's not going anywhere, but it is bound to. I put it on the edge of my sewing machine, on my table, and inadvertently I will always find it somewhere on the floor, and that really kind of annoys me. The other thing that I don't like about this particular one, well, besides the fact the cap doesn't fit on here, no, I guess that's the only thing I really don't like about it. It's a standard seam ripper, but I want to talk about this piece. So when you're done pulling out your stitches, you see you always have these little threads. You can pull those out by hand, or you can use the rubber tip end of this, and you see, it pulls them right out completely, pick them up, throw them in the garbage. So I like that feature of it. There's also the same kind of thing on the end of this. So if you lay down your cap somewhere and you need that and you can't find the cap because it's rolled onto the floor, you can use this end of it. This one is called Seam Fix. Yeah, Seam Fix. Can't tell you who this is by because I don't know. There's no other markings on it and I have forgotten. But you can get these. Depending on where you buy them, they're not cheap. I think I spent like about $10 to $12 for this. And that's the other thing. Seam rippers come in a variety of prices, and I have found the cheaper the seam ripper, the cheaper the quality. So if you go to Walmart and you pick up a seam ripper, they're probably the cheaper ones. They're probably pretty much close to this kind of thing, at least the ones I've seen. But many companies like Cloverleaf, this might be by Cloverleaf. No, I don't think it is. Cloverleaf sells them, all kinds of different companies. So there's a good variety of seam rippers, okay? But that's what I like about this one, as I said, is I like the fact it has this little rubber ball on the end that allows me to pull my stitches, my cut stitches out of my fabric easily. Okay, so that's two of them. Now I'm going to show you something I just got and I actually have not really used it yet, so this might be a bad time to actually experiment. This seam ripper I bought on Amazon. It's a surgical steel seam ripper. I've seen them in stores for up to about $30 some. This I think I paid $20 for. Okay, you get this nice case, looks like a glass case, and it's called Pro Seam Ripper. Again, I am not sure who made it. Inside you have instructions, and maybe that will tell me who made it. Chestnut Tools is the name of the company that made it. And you have two seam rippers. One's actually a seam picker, and one's actually the ripper, picker and ripper. And I'll show you what the differences between the two of them. And you also get some extra blades. So unlike these other conventional seam rippers, you can't sharpen them. Once they get dull, it's thrown away by a new one. These, actually, you can replace the blade. Now let's talk about the blade. Okay, so I told you there are two types of seam ripper here. Get these both in shot. This one is the picker. You know it's the picker because it's got the same kind of blade, but at the very top it comes to a very sharp little point, so you can get underneath the stitches, especially those ones that have been locked down. This is the one which has a dull tip to it, but this blade, a little bigger blade here, is the ripper itself. Now, according to the instructions, and I have not used this at all yet, all you do is take your fabric, use the seam picker one. That's the one that has the little pointy end. Ouch. Yes, it is a pointy end. Bloodletting here. Okay, these are sharp. And pull out your seam. Okay, this is going to be difficult to see because I just realized I put this on bad fabric. Now, one thing that I think this would be really good for, let's do it from this side, you can see the seam, is getting into very tiny stitches. And I do have fairly tiny stitches here. I think my machine was set at 1.8 when I put these in. So you can get right under here and cut. Now you got to be careful when you're picking these out that you don't cut your fabric, because this is very, very sharp. Once you get a few of them out, then you can use this part for the bigger rip. Again, it might be a good idea to take your fabric, pin it to something, and then holding your fabric, you can just, I'm doing this very awkwardly. I'm going to try something here. Let me just switch this around to this side for pinning. See if this makes a difference. No, you shouldn't do it from that side. No, 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 no. Let's go back here. Like I said, I haven't used this one before, so it may take a little time to get used to it. Oops. Okay, it says you won't rip your fabric, but yes, you can rip your fabric with this. Okay, I don't know if I'm that impressed with this. It's good for this. So I guess you really can't just zip down your seam. Okay, this I'm finding very awkward. I was following the instructions, but I don't like them. Okay, so this would be the way that I would probably use it then. Now the hook is nice because I can get right in there. I'm not struggling. So yeah, this works okay. And I think this would be really good if you've got some really tight, small stitches. And I guess once you get used to doing it, let's pin it in there. Can you see? I probably don't have it in the shot. Let's see here. All right. Let's pin that fabric down here. And let's just go. Okay. Seam ripping is not a fast job, but a good sharp blade really helps. Oh, I just ripped the fabric. Okay, oops, I'm an idiot. Don't do what I do, do what I say. Okay, anyways, you get the idea, right? Now, some people do get their stitches started, pulling them out, and then they take the fabric and they go like that. I don't recommend that. It might work, it might not work. I think you're living dangerously by doing something like that, but you know, experienced sewers, maybe they can get away with something like that. Okay, so that's these two little tools. As I said, they can be quite expensive, but I got them on Amazon for a good price. These will not be the ones that I'm going to reach for on a daily basis, only if I've got some really stubborn stitches. And I think this might help if I had to pull out some stitches in quilting. I think you'd be able to get at those very easily. But again, like with any seam ripper, you're going to have to be careful that you don't rip your fabric. Wouldn't that be horrible? You have your whole quilt quilted, you've got to pull out a few stitches, you get these stuck in your fabric, and you put a hole in your quilt. I have a feeling, well, I know what I would be doing at that point, and it wouldn't be nice. So, as I said, it comes in this nice little case. These ones did. They don't all come in a nice little case. It depends on what you buy and where you buy them. And actually, I just noticed something on the cover of this, or the inside. Okay, put it in the right way, idiot. Here we go. On the cover in here, it gives you the website. Now, as I said, I bought these on Amazon, but you could check out the website too. www.chestnuttools.com. Okay. Now, just to let you know, I'm not sponsored by this company or any company. If anybody wants to sponsor me, hey, that would be really cool. But nobody sponsors me. So, my opinions are my opinions. Okay. Oops, forgot to put the handy little instruction booklet in there too. Okay. Now I'm going to show you my favorite seam ripper. This is a seam ripper I love to use when I have got a long row of stitches, straight line, and I want to get them out fast. Now we all know what the dangers are of doing that with a seam ripper. Even if it's got a protective red ball on the end, even if it's got the fancy little hook, the whole bit, you can still rip your fabric. This little product I'm about to show you does not rip your fabric. Now, you would usually get your seam started here, and I'll just take my seam ripper and I'm just going to pull out a few stitches to start. There, that's enough. And I'm going to pin this down. This works best if you pin it to something. You can actually pin it to your pant leg. Be careful you don't prick yourself, because I've done that. But you need some leverage. So you put your pin in, and here it is. My little electric seam ripper. Now, you may have seen things like this before and you went, wait, that's a seam ripper? I thought you bought these for hair, for little trimming, like mustache trimmer, or, you know, little shave on the neck, whatever. Yes, that is what they were originally made for. But the sewing world's got their hands on it, including Eleanor Burns now has her own model. They all look like this, just different colors. This one's called a Galaxy Notions. That's probably where I bought it. I bought it on Amazon. These were for sale at, no, sorry, I did not buy this on Notions. I bought this at my local quilt store, and it was expensive. It was about 25 bucks. Later, I discovered that you could buy them on Amazon for about, not quite half that price, but for about $10 to $12 cheaper. And you can do a search on Amazon, just say electric seam ripper, and these will come up. They take a couple of batteries, and actually one battery, one AA battery, which will last quite a long time, I have found. Well, it depends on how often you need to rip out your seams, doesn't it? On, off button, little blades here. You see, it's very safe for your skin. The teeth are very, very tiny. Don't know if you can see that. Okay, so that's what prevents your fabric from getting ripped, because only the threads of your seam, of your stitching, can get in there. So how does this work? You'll be amazed. Okay, so I've pinned down my fabric. I've got my seam along here. I've got it partially open so I can see some of the stitches here. I'm just going to put it down and away I go. Just like that. Cool, huh? Took me seconds. And then if I've got this thing handy, I can always, you know, pull out the threads, the cut threads. But just like that, it works like a dream. Now, I wouldn't use this for just pulling out a couple of stitches, but when I have to do a whole row like that, it makes short work of it. This is my favorite seam ripper. And when I take this to retreats and people hear it go on, they all know I'm ripping out seams, stitches. Actually, I tell them I'm manscaping. That became a joke at one of the retreats. Every time I pulled it out and it started up, people are going, oh, he's manscaping again. A little story about this. When I first bought this at the store, I came home, I was real excited. I got an electric seam ripper. And I said this to Walter. And Walter says, wait, I have one of those. And this was before he was actually doing any kind of sewing. And I said, what do you mean you have one of these? He says, just a minute. Went down to his workshop, opened up a drawer, pulled out a black one of these. Looked exactly the same, just black. And he says, yeah, he bought it for his mother years ago when she was in the nursing home to give, you know, a little light trim on, you know, spots where women don't like to have hair, kind of a thing, to put it gently. And it cost him like next to nothing when he bought it. And I said, no, it can't be the same. This must have the same teeth. No, exactly the same. Exactly the same. I tried it out. Yep, worked the same. So, you know, you might want to look around in, say, Walmart or places like that. You might get these for a much better price than what a quilt store might be selling it at, or even Amazon for that matter. But I love it. It's great. It works well, and it's great with embroidery too. Machine embroidery. If you've got a bird's nest on the back of your piece, the thread all bunched up and knotted up, well, when you do it with an embroidery machine, those knots are pretty tight and they're big. When that happens, you can shave through them, this layer by layer. Just shave it right off, right out if you need to. So it works really good for that as well. So this is my favorite of all of my seam rippers, especially when I'm doing a big ripping job. So there we have the different seam rippers that I own. Just get them in shot here. And as I said, there are many, many more on the market. So you have to find something that works for you. So I hope, let me raise you up here for a minute. Just take a look at my face, ugly face. There we go. So I hope that that was helpful for you, especially when you're first getting into sewing. You're going to need a seam ripper. So invest in a decent one. And, you know, it doesn't even matter how many years you've been sewing or that. Mistakes happen. Seam rippers are there. So we'll see you later for another Idiot Quilter. Bye-bye for now.